All right. I'm Kura. I am doing a presentation on Rie Matsumoto and the reoccurring themes that occur throughout her works, and sort of my investigation of watching the two shows that she had two TV shows she had full directorial control over, and reading all the English translated interviews she's done, and see how what she says about herself sort of matches up to what she's done. Um, this presentation started in a bit of a different place, but as you'll see later on, what I originally wanted to do the presentation on kind of ended up being a null hypothesis. Uh, Obviously, spoilers for Kekai Sensen and Kyoso Giga. I'm gonna spoil the ending for both those shows and many things along the way. Is there a problem? Oh, alrighty. So I think the number one thing Rie Matsumoto is known for is themes of family. So when she's been asked this question in an interview, her response is that family is actually not something she necessarily strives for. It's something what she thinks the theme that she's most attached to and the one she likes to pursue is characters figuring out their place in the world. But she considers family a natural follow-up from pursuing that question. She tends to just start thinking about uh, how to attack that question with certain characters, and she naturally is drawn to family. And you see the quote here I have on the screen um, about what she exactly says. Um, yeah, I think I'll keep moving on. We're going to start with Kyoso Giga first. I'm going to do discuss the characters of Kyoso Giga, then explain how Kekai Sensen ties into family. So the three protagonists of Kyoso Giga, young Koto, Yakshimaru, and Inari, I think are all really great examples of how she uses family to explore their place in the world. That's just really present throughout all of Kyoso Giga, but particularly these three. Koto is her main dilemma from the outset is that she doesn't really have a family, or when she discovers that Inari is her family, she still has questions about her mother, and the whole story is sort of her journey where she's wanting to find her mother, then she finds her mother, and a new problem crops up that now her mother is having problems with her father. Koto's the most simple dilemma of the three, and really most of her struggles are actually just directly resolved by the plot. She doesn't have necessarily an internal. Her biggest internal struggle is that she's never met her family, and as soon as her family is happy again, Koto is essentially happy again. But in order to find herself, in order to gain that sense of identity, Koto needs to bring her family together, which is essentially the journey of Kyoso Giga, excluding all the flashbacks. All right. Inari, not Inari, so Yakshimaru is next. Yakshimaru could be contrasted with Koto, where Koto might say she doesn't have a past and so she only lives for the future. Yakshimaru sort of traps himself in the past and isn't interested in the future because of that. And Inari, it's revealed in episode 5, had a family that was not the Kyoso Giga father-sibling mishmash. Inari had a very traditional Japanese family, which was murdered and his house burnt down in some sort of blood feud that is left completely ambiguous beyond that. And Inari himself, Yakshimaru himself committed ritual suicide following the incident, but Inari resurrected him, gave him immortality, and really set in motion Yakshimaru's self-doubt and issues throughout the series, his difficulty adjusting to his new family, and that's really only compounded when the events of Kyoso Giga begin, and he loses his mother and father, which he was really only tentatively beginning to accept his role in the story at that point. And the resolution, which is found in Kyoso Giga, is bit of technical difficulties there, is ultimately through his interactions with Koto, and particularly I like this conversation I have on screen with Kurama. He realizes that desiring a future does not betray his past, he is not betraying his prior family in the process of learning to love and value his new ones. And you sort of see this throughout the course of the series. It's that he's growing, particularly his interactions with Koto, that he's growing close and more open with her, the younger Koto, that is. But it's I really like this moment. I think it really spells out something that not only is true for Yakushimaru, but also for someone in Kekai Sensen. We'll get back to that later. Inari has his conflict is spelled out throughout the course of the latter half of Kekai Sensen, mostly after the plot twist that he is not. Inari has never really been happy with himself outside of the brief moment where he had his pretend family. He sort of had he's always wondered the point of his existence, and it's sort of Inari's life is pretty much an ongoing existential crisis, barring the reprieve of essentially episode 1 of Kyoto Giga. And it's only really through the interactions with his wife and his children, and really the events of Kyoto Giga, especially the finale itself, that Inari somewhat learns to value himself. But even then, he needs this final speech from God, also known as his father, that he can just be. He doesn't need a purpose in life, which is the question he's sort of been agonizing over right from his conception, that what is he needed for when he has a brother that already seems to do all the godly duties. And while this is kind of in Kyoto Giga presented as a godlike manner, this is definitely to the core of the story's view on a family, and that it's a traditional family had a very distinct roles, very distinct jobs for the head. And the family presented in Kyoto Giga, especially with Koto, is a more modern family, which challenges that, more of a with a equal relationship between Koto and Inari. There's sent a very interesting video that expands upon that idea, but I will not go further into that here. So those are the three main protagonists of Kyoto Giga and how they sort of bounce off each other. But you also have Yase and Kurama, which also are probably the simpler cases, but they really exemplify how they really exemplify the importance of family to Kyoto Giga. And for Koto specifically, they kind of add these extra bounce for Koto and Yakushimaru. They add these extra points of characters that are a bit more comfortable with themselves, that through their interactions with them, they can sort of come to terms with their own issues. And I mean, this is pretty much just spelled out right in the middle of episode 9. This is a conversation to Yakushimaru that Kurama and Yase were siblings made to comfort Yakushimaru. But not only do they comfort him, they comfort later on Koto. The interactions episode 3 and 4 are definitely more the comfortable slice of life side of Kyoto Giga, and they I'd say the interactions with them, while not really being the climactic resolution points where they come to terms with their issues, they were important points on the way to letting those characters gain experiences to come to terms with where they are in the world, as Rie Matsumoto would say. Shifting gears to Kekai Sensen, I think I'm going to be retreading a lot of what I said about Kyoto Giga here, because I find Leo is a very similar character to Yakushimaru, which is not entirely to Rie Matsumoto's credit, because she did not design the character Leo. That's he's from an adapted manga. But what Rie Matsumoto did design is the characters of Black and White, which are sort of designed to bring out the character aspects from Leo that Rie Matsumoto wanted to. And I have a quote here from an interview she did about how Kekai Sensen being her first adapted work, she was asked, what challenges did she face in that? And and of course she mentioned the obvious stuff like staying true to the original source material, but for her, the biggest issue was how to end it. Because at the time of the adaptation, it was only halfway through its run, and Leo's core character conflict is with his younger sister Michelle, which hasn't been resolved yet in the manga. And Rie Matsumoto didn't want to close the door and write sort of a completely anime original ending that would shut off, that would make the have to be retconned if they ever did a sequel. So this is a quote where she's sort of talking about how she invented black and white to be able to give the story sort of a satisfying conclusion and to address core themes that she thought she couldn't address, given just the half of material she had to work with. And I think that's really I think that's a really interesting, really clever proposition she came up with there, because black and white's issue very much mirror Leo and Michelle's issues. They both have a lot of guilt in their sibling relationship. They had what was a very close relationship between siblings that a specific tragedy put a lot of distance in, and then one party felt very guilty over over what their role in that tragedy, and it really led to a distance. And black and white being original, Rie Matsumoto could introduce and completely resolve that conflict for within the course of the show. But Leo's role in that conflict, in order to really help and resolve in order to help and resolve the black and white's interpersonal turmoil, he would have to somewhat accept himself. At the beginning of Kekai Sensen, he's very much kind of lost in the city. He knows he's gone there looking for redemption, but it's not until his interactions with Libra and his interactions with Black and White that he really comes to accept himself and sort of move on from his grief. And a very, I think the interesting way that is demonstrated is the shot I have on screen here, where he has to confront White, and he essentially has to encourage Black and White to do exactly what he cannot and reconcile their differences. And this is something that he's kind of known he had to do at this point for a couple episodes, but it wasn't until the finale itself that he really got the composure to do it. I think it's a great way of sort of having Leo confront what is his core character conflict without actually directly having him confront his sister, which is something Rie Matsumoto considered she didn't have the creative control to do. So I think it's a very creative solution to that problem, and it really goes back to the way she liked the first quote I presented of how this is Leo finding his place in the world through helping Black and White confounding their own issues. I believe the next thing I have, yeah, this is a transition away from the family topic. This is maybe perhaps the most interesting thing I found throughout cruising through the interviews is Rie Matsumoto has this great attachment for the characters of Kyoto Giga, which probably isn't that surprising given that she worked so hard to get it made. But the way she kind of describes the story, it's less of her as a battle against Toei in order to get Kyoto Giga done. It's more that she was offered the shot of doing this one episode OVA, and she had more or less complete creative freedom in it, but there was no guarantee anything more would come of it. So she did the best job she could, and if there was a struggle to get the next OVA series that followed Kyoto Giga made, she doesn't describe that struggle. She's saying it's more, if it does well, I might get more. And then she did get more. And this interview was taken before the Kyoto Giga TV had aired, and sort of how she felt about why she wanted the TV show, which, I mean, obviously you do want it, and her feelings about if it was just left, right? And she calls it here the Kyoto Giga TV is an end for the characters, right? They had no idea there would be an end, and they thought they might just leave the characters unfinished. And she actually didn't, she felt very uncomfortable doing that. She feels very attached to her characters. And she even goes as far as to say it would almost be a betrayal to leave the characters the way they were. And I found this very interesting. And I think it really feeds into the structure of Kyoto Giga if you view it as an end for the characters, being Rie Matsumoto's chief objective. Because you really can see that, I mean, it's not at all odd for episodic shows to have this setup, but, episode 1 is sort of a setup episode, but it's also focused on later Koto. It sort of introduces a lot of character motivations, and you get the most of Koto there, of the older Koto. Episode 2 is a clear introduction of the younger Koto. Episode 3, you get Kuramhan and crew. 4, you get Yaze and the yokai. 5, you get Yakushimaru's somewhat tragic backstory. And so the first 5 episodes are really just going through all the characters that were introduced in the initial OVA and giving them all more characterization. With the somewhat exception of Inari. You get some of Inari in episode 1, but really his stuff comes later. And then, so in episode 6, you get the OVA happens. Some of episode 6 is original content, but a lot of it is just the original OVA being aired in the TV show. And from 7 onwards, the plot begins. You get a lot of Inari's characterization, and you get essentially a resolution to all these character arcs that are brought up. And I think it's just a really interesting... It's clear, I think, that an end for the characters was Rie Matsumoto's goal first and foremost when structuring the writing of the series. And she wanted to make sure every character that appeared in the OVA got at least some screen time in the TV show, and ideally a decent amount of characterization. Not ready for that yet. One other thing I thought was quite interesting is sort of on a meta level. You can almost see Inari and Koto to somewhat be sort of Rie Matsumoto's inserting her desire for the characters. Like the story, if you think about the story structure of, or the core story of Kyoto Giga, is Inari and Koto do not want to abandon this family that they created. And of course to them it is family, which not just fictional characters. But I almost feel like Rie Matsumoto's years in getting Kyoto Giga made actually affected her when it came time to finally write the 10-episode story, that she'd become so attached to them and she'd been so lamenting to give these characters what they deserved, that she actually wrote that to be the plot of Kyoto Giga. So that's I think that's probably the most interesting thing I'm going to say in this presentation. Religion. All right. Religion is what I wanted to be originally this presentation to be about, but that was sort of my null hypothesis that Kekai Sensen has a lot of religion. Kyoto Giga has a lot more Shinto and Buddhist religion instead of Christian stuff, but I also thought Kyoto Giga on my first watch had some Christianity stuff floating around in there. I'm not entirely sure it doesn't, but after reading interviews and rewatching Kyoto Giga, I decided there's no way I could kind of do this as a comprehensive overview of Rie Matsumoto and religion, because I really think, I don't have a quote for this here, but Rie Matsumoto has said in several points in interviews that folklore is something that's always interested her, and I think that is really the primary feed for Kyoto Giga. She talks in when going through character designs how different elements of folklore were important to creating the character designs in the early Kyoto Giga OVAs. And I think it's very clear that's really where that feeds it from. And then a lot of Buddhist and Shinto religious aspects fed in. And as I have a quote on screen here, Kyoto Giga, Kekai Sensen, Rie Matsumoto felt was already had already had strong religious themes in the series. And can't highlight. Oops. So while I'd say that she very much doubled down on those strong religious themes and essentially going to the point of introducing Satan as a character, and I guess I should move on that I have shots to suggest this. The Christian themes in Kekai Sensen, while very central to the story, and I think there's a lot of interesting things you could say about them, they don't seem to be something that Rie Matsumoto inserted herself. She rather doubled down on the themes that she thought were already present in the manga, and certainly put her own spin on them. But I don't think you could say that the religious themes of Kekai Sensen and Kyoto Giga are coming from the same place at all. And I think these are just some Christian. The shot I have on the screen here this is kind of the shot that made me realize that the Lord of Despair is really just a proxy for Satan. The way he's positioned in these shots, and throughout the finale, there's a lot of burning crosses. Really, if you go throughout, if you wanted to comprehensively discuss the religion in Kekai Sensen, there's so many shots that allude to him essentially being Satan. And yeah, that is all I got to. So questions?
I really liked the segment about that you had on the characters from Kyoto Giga being not a projection, but sort of, I guess in a way, a projection of sort of what her aspirations are for the series as a whole, especially in the context of the quote that you just given. I'm curious to know, I'm curious to hear you say or describe those connections more literally, though. I mean, you kind of alluded towards it, but I would have loved to hear how you saw it, I guess.
Yeah. I see. I mean, you're talking about the quote. All right. I think it's more that Inari and Koto, right? They spend the majority of the story trying to get back into the Looking Glass world, right? They're sort of, due to various plot reasons, separated from their creations, which at kind of the core of the story is that that's where they want to get back. Inari has his own issues, so perhaps you say Koto is perhaps the more of a Matsumoto proxy, but that's the core, is that they want to get back into this fictional land, and it's so it's modeled after Alice in Wonderland imagery. It couldn't be more fictitious than it is, and it's even contrasted in like episode 2 to the outside world, which is presented a lot more realistically. And so it's just while perhaps not thematically but plot wise, the core struggle of Kyoto Giga for the adult characters is a struggle to return to their fictional world with their fictional characters. And I just think that's a great proxy for Rie Matsumoto's struggle to evolve this series from a single episode OVA to a 6-episode OVA to a full-fledged TV show.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
All right. So we'll have a 5-minute break for anybody to, I don't know, you can go and get food or get a snack or something. And if you have any other questions or you want to field any other questions, feel free to ask Kura. In the meantime, our next presentation is Plake with Kara no Kyokai, Terror Management, and the Four Noble Truths. As per usual, you can send me the PDF, or you can put it onto Beamium, or you can upload it onto Dropbox yourself and set it up through Slightly Slink. Other than that, thank you. And thank you, Kura, for that presentation.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.